It is also during this time period when we have the entrance of a rather unsavory character by the name of Gregory Rasputin. He claimed to be a Russian Orthodox monk, but the Orthodox Church does not claim him. He was an unsavory character. He was tall and heavy. He had a bushy beard and rarely washed. Yet he had a magnetic personality. For some reason, despite the fact that he had very little personal hygiene, he was irresistible to women. And he had a growing reputation as a healer. And this last aspect of his life is what's important to the story. You see, before 1904, Nicholas and Alexandra had 4 daughters. But in July of 1904, Alexandra gives birth to a son, Alexis. And now Nicholas will have his heir. Joy at the birth turned quickly into sorrow when it became clear that Alexis had hemophilia, a disorder that prevents blood from clotting naturally. The main danger from hemophilia does not come from being just cut, because the pressure on the wound would stop the bleeding, but rather a bruise produces internal bleeding, and that's where you get in trouble. In 1912, the prince is going to fall and bruise himself, and he suffers from severe internal hemorrhaging and unbearable pain. Alexandra nurses him night and day, and doctors are trying everything they possibly can. Nothing helps. Then Alexandra hears about this monk. She telegraphs to Rasputin, who replies, "Tell the doctors not to bother the little one too much. He will be all right." Alexander sends the doctors away, and would you know, within hours, Alexis's eternal bleeding actually stops, and he begins to recover. Alexandra thinks that Rasputin had just done a miracle. She summons him to the palace, where he becomes a regular fixture. Even when there are clear evidence that Rasputin's immoral life was brought to the Tsarina's attention, she just refused to believe it. For example, he would routinely seduce the ladies of the royal court. We'll talk about that in just a bit. Against his better judgment, Nicholas allowed her to have her way, and people's respect for the royal family just declines even further. So why do we talk about Rasputin? He's probably a charlatan, but he has the Tsarina in his thrall. She listens to him, and Nicholas listens to her. The unwashed monk, in effect, becomes an advisor to the government. So long as Nicholas is around in St. Petersburg, this is not bad, because Nicholas has his other advisors to listen to. But then World War I begins. And we've traced Russia's role at the beginning of the war, and how Russia takes a hammering in 1914 and 15. Nicholas seems to think that the war is about to be lost. So he decides the only way to save Russia was to take it over as the supreme commander. He has little military talent, but that's not the only reason it's such a bad move. Nicholas leaves the government in the hands of his wife, who listens only to Rasputin. In Nicholas's absence, Rasputin wreaks havoc. He knew all of the naval men in high government positions detested him, so he convinced Alexandra to dismiss them and replace them with weak, immoral men that he could control. As a result, the situation in Russia deteriorates rapidly. In 1916, word finally reaches Nicholas on the front. He's determined to fire Rasputin's appointments, but Alexandra intervenes. She manages to talk Nicholas out of dismissing those ministers. That's the last straw for Rasputin's enemies, though. A group of aristocrats are going to plot his murder. They hoped that by removing him, they could save Russia. There were probably they probably had also personal motivations for it. Perhaps these men actually had their wives had flings with Rasputin. So the aristocrats lured Rasputin to their house to poison them. They prepared a trap by putting cyanide in each of 3 pastries and a pitcher of wine. And on New Year's Eve, they are going to lure him with a fake invitation from one of the wives. Rasputin comes to the house and eats 2 of the 3 pastries and downs 2 glasses of wine. Unfortunately, this is not enough to kill Rasputin, but it is enough to kill 4 men. Desperate, one of the aristocrats comes out with a revolver and shoots him in the chest at point-blank range. Rasputin crashes to the floor on a snow-white polar rug. It sounds like something out of a horror movie, but we have it all. The men roll Rasputin over, and there's no blood on the rug, and only a small hole in Rasputin's chest, despite the fact that the bullet most likely passed through his heart. Then he started breathing. His eyes open up. His farms shoot out. And he grabs one of the aristocrats and whispers in his ear, Felix, Felix, Felix. Felix is a man named Felix Yusupov. And he pumps more bullets into Rasputin. 2 miss him. 1 hits him in the shoulder and 1 goes through the neck. He collapses and they drag him back outside, back into the house. Again, his eyes open up. Yusupov grabs a heavy walking stick and beats Rasputin until his body was still again. They bind it with ropes. They drove it to a river and they throw it off the bridge. On the way down, Rasputin's body hits either a bridge piling or some ice, cracking his head open. Finally, the body disappears in the black water, and Yusupov and his companion drive away. Now, Rasputin had enough poison to kill 4 men. He'd been shot at least 3 times, twice in a way that would kill most people. He was beaten to a pulp, and he was thrown into a river. But when his body was retrieved the next day, water was found in his lungs, and the ropes binding him were actually almost worked out free. And the fact that you have water in your lungs implies that he was trying to breathe underwater. But Rasputin was dead on New Year's Eve, 1917. Alexandra was heartbroken. She believed that he was the last hope for her son, and unfortunately, Rasputin's death didn't do anything to solve anything. His work had been done. The royal family's prestige was ruined through scandal, and a power vacuum existed in the Russian imperial government. Continued military catastrophe wrecked the economy. In March of 1917, bread riots are going to occur in St. Petersburg. And unlike 1905, the riots are not suppressed by the soldiers, they're actually joined in by the soldiers.